Hi, everyone. I could see we have a few people just joining us, so we'll give it a few seconds to let everyone into the webinar and then we'll get started. Okay, we'll let some other folks trickle in while I do my intro. Ross, can you just give me a thumbs up that you can see my presentation?
I can.
Okay, okay. I lost my little green box around it, so I wasn't sure if I was sharing the right screen. Okay, now we can officially get started. Hey, welcome everyone, and welcome to the Invasive Species Center webinar series. My name is Lauren, and I'm a Senior Communications Coordinator with the Invasive Species Center. So it's fun to be able to work with a fellow communications colleague in moderating this webinar today. So before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that the Invasive Species Center honors the long history of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation people on the land now known as Canada, and strives to we greatly appreciate the significance of land, waters, and all living things, and offer our gratitude to the Indigenous people for their care and teachings about our Earth. Our relationships with Indigenous communities are important, and we will continue to listen and learn how we can be in a good relationship with Indigenous peoples, the lands and waters, and all living things and act accordingly. So the Invasive Species Center respectfully acknowledges that our head office is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Batchewana, and Garden River First Nations, as well as a longtime settlement of the Métis people in the Robinson Huron Treaty area. And then I would like to acknowledge that I'm coming from you today from my home office, where I live and work in St. Joseph Island, which is Treaty 11 territory. So just a teeny bit about the Invasive Species Center. We are a nonprofit organization that mobilizes action against invasive species that harm the environment, economy, and society in Canada and beyond. And always have to do the plug for our website. I'm very biased, but I think it's great, and there's great resources on there. So you can find best management practices, species profiles, video resources, including this webinar today is being recorded. All of our past webinars have been recorded, so you can find them there, as well as newsletters and blog content and a whole heck of a lot more. If you'd like, you could sign up for our eBlast subscription list. So this is where all of our newsletters, our biweekly media scan, as well as to learn about future webinars like this, you'll get that right into your inbox. And then we've also launched a training program recently. I say recently, it's been a couple of years now, but recent enough. So we actually have 5 courses on there right now. There's lots about forest pests, including a free spotted lanternfly course, as well as a new one about marble crayfish. So we're delving into the aquatic invasive species training area, which lines up perfectly with our webinar today. So without further ado, I'm really happy to be joined by Ross Shaw. So Ross graduated from the University of Michigan in 2018 with a bachelor's in environmental science and ecology and evolutionary biology with a focus on conservation of aquatic resources. So he ended up in a great place. So Ross has been working with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which is the US-Canadian organization that coordinates fisheries management and sea lamprey control. Ross is also coordinating the Education and Outreach Program for the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, which has brought him here with us today. Okay, I went a slide too far. That's how you know you're done. So just a very quick housekeeping before I turn it over to Ross. Please save your questions for the end. We have a dedicated Q&A question period. You could type them in the Q&A box at any time. Please try to avoid using the chat for this, as it just streamlines it a bit at the end when I'm moderating that. So yes, please put questions in the Q&A box throughout, and we will have a dedicated time at the end where I can ask those to Ross. So officially passing it over to you, Ross.
Awesome. Thanks for the great introduction. It's always so weird hearing, oh, graduated in 2018, and that's like 7 years ago. It's always a kind of a time is a weird, fickle thing. All right, let me get the my correct slides up. All right, and you guys should be seeing the slides. Is that correct?
Looks great.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming to this webinar today. I appreciate you here and attending this event to hear me talk about Great Lakes sea lampreys and the GLC's sea lamprey control program. Yeah, so let's jump into it. So before I spend the most of this hour talking about how sea lampreys are harmful here in the Great Lakes, I do want to point out that lampreys across the world, there are more than 80 lamprey species. Lampreys across the world are very important parts of their ecosystems. And here in the Great Lakes is the only instance where lampreys are actually invasive in an ecosystem. So there are a number of different lampreys actually here close to us in North America. So we have the Pacific lamprey on the west coast of North America. We also have 4 native lamprey species here in the Great Lakes. So we have the northern brook, the silver, the chestnut, and the American brook lamprey. And as you can kind of see from this photo, the native lamprey species are going to be significantly smaller than the sea lampreys. And that's kind of illustrates why sea lampreys are such a problem here in the Great Lakes, and the native lampreys are not. So sea lampreys are, as we'll get into, are native to the Atlantic Ocean. They're used to feeding on much larger fish, and when they come into the Great Lakes, they are going to be much more destructive to the hosts that they prey upon, whereas native lamprey species have co-evolved with Great Lakes fish. And so even of these 4 species, only 2 of them, the chestnut and the silver, are actually going to parasitize fish. But even those that parasitize, because they've co-evolved with Great Lakes fish species, they don't actually kill their hosts nearly as often as the sea lampreys do. And that's, again, due to coevolution and the size. Other lampreys here in North America. So sea lampreys, being native to the Atlantic Ocean, they're actually very important in their native range on the coast of east coast of North America, but as well as the west coast of Europe. So places like Spain and Portugal, they're very valued culturally for their food. Unfortunately, they are imperiled in their native range, and so while they are very valued for a food fish, because of that imperiled status, they are not. They are much harder to come by. And some important parts about native lampreys, or the importance rather of native lampreys in their native ecosystems. They're what's called ecosystem engineers. So they're going to aerate the stream bed. They're going to filter water when they're in that larval phase, when they're buried up in the stream bed, just poking their heads out and filter feeding. They're also a food source for many organisms, whether that be in their larval phase, when they're just up small and up in the stream beds, or in their adult phase, when they're running upstream to spawn and die. They're also transporting nutrients up into rivers and streams from the lake and the ocean. When they're, again, running upstream to spawn and die, there can be nutrients that are limited in a ocean or a lake ecosystem, or rather that are limited in the rivers or stream ecosystem that are more abundant than the ocean or lake ecosystem. And so when sea lampreys actually run from the lake or ocean up into the rivers and streams, and they spawn and die and their body decomposes, they're actually doing a pretty vital service to that ecosystem in that they're bringing some of those nutrients that were previously limited and bringing those to the ecosystem. And of course, like I touched on a little bit earlier, they're very culturally important. So very culturally important to folks over in Europe, as well as indigenous peoples here in North America. So specifically on the West Coast with Pacific lamprey, a lot of indigenous groups out there value it for its food as part of their culture. And you can kind of see some photos here from the folks on the West Coast here and their importance of Pacific lamprey out there. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this and talk about sea lampreys and their invasion here in the Great Lakes. So sea lampreys came in through the man-made shipping canals in the early 1800s. So previously they were only in Lake Ontario, and that's because Niagara Falls prevented them from getting into the rest of the Great Lakes. So it was about 100 years from early 1800s to about 1919 when the Welland Canal was widened and deepened. At that time, the Great Lakes region was growing, the Great Lakes economy was growing, and with that growing economy and the growing region, there was an increased need for more goods and services, as well as larger ships to bring those goods and services. And so, to accommodate these larger ships, they decided to build the Welland Canal. And unfortunately, if these large ships could bypass Niagara Falls, so could sea lampreys. And so by 1924, sea lampreys had bypassed the falls and had been identified in Lake Erie. And a little bit less than 15 years later, sea lampreys made it to Lake Superior and completed their invasion into the Great Lakes. Sea lampreys were a devastating invader at the time. So back in that day, the Great Lakes fishery not only was much larger than it is today currently, but it was a much larger part of the economy, and so and the Great Lakes way of life. And so sea lampreys invasion really threw a wrench into the Great Lakes way of life. It destroyed the economically viable commercial, recreational, and tribal fisheries, as well as devastating many large-bodied fish populations. One of those fish, in particular, was lake trout. So lake trout was a very important species for the ecosystem, but then also for the commercial fishery as well. So you can see from this graph here that commercial lake trout harvest was quite abundant in the early 1900s, but combined with overfishing and the sea lamprey invasion, sea lampreys largely kind of brought that lake trout harvest down to pretty well zero. So lake trout were actually eliminated from 4 out of the 5 Great Lakes, and so the only lake where lake trout actually remained was in Lake Superior, and that was because that was the last lake that sea lampreys invaded, but also the first lake that sea lamprey control was started on. And to kind of put this devastation into context in terms of the commercial fishery, at their peak, sea lampreys were killing more than 100 million pounds of fish per year, which was more than 5 times the commercial harvest. So they were absolutely devastating invaders to the Great Lakes fishery at the time. So if you've never seen sea lamprey, you might be wondering, well, how exactly does do its damage? Well, sea lampreys are blood-sucking parasites, so they latch on the sides of fish and they drink the fish's bodily fluids. And I know your first question, as soon as you hear something blood-sucking that's swimming in lakes, is will it attach to me? Will it drink my blood? Well, the good news is no. Sea lampreys prefer cold-blooded fish, and so by and large, they're only going to attack fish and other cold-blooded creatures. In outreach, for example, I can encourage, if I have a live sea lamprey with me, I can encourage it to suction onto my hand because that's its natural defense mechanism is I'll take it out of its tank and I'll suction it onto my hand as kind of a demonstration of its suction power. But even then, when I have it actually suctioning onto my hand, it's not actually going to drink my blood. It just has a really strong suction. But again, it identifies that I'm a warm-blooded creature and that I'm not cold-blooded, and so isn't really interested in feeding on me. So this is the business end of the sea lamprey, the sea lamprey's mouth. And so there are 3 distinct parts of the sea lamprey's mouth that make it so successful. So we have the outside of its mouth acts like a suction cup. We estimate that suction is about 5 times as strong as a household vacuum cleaner. So if you think, if you're a fish swimming out in the Great Lakes and you have something with the suction about 5 times as strong as a vacuum cleaner suction onto you, there's really, unfortunately, not a lot that the fish can do, right? And we've seen underwater footage of that too. When sea lampreys will attach to fish, they wriggle, they try to rub the sea lamprey off on a rock, for example. But again, that suction is extremely strong, so very difficult to break away from that fish unless it's by the sea lamprey's own power. Combined with that suction, we also have more than 150 razor sharp teeth that help the fish, or help the sea lamprey grip onto the sides of the fish. And then finally, when it's tightly secured to that fish, the sea lamprey uses the rasping tongue, which acts like sandpaper to slowly rasp away at the sea lamprey's skin so that it can start drinking its blood. What's particularly interesting is that when sea lampreys actually start drinking the blood of a fish, they excrete an enzyme that acts like an anticoagulant so that they can drink as much blood as they want. So normally, like for example, if you or me fall and scrape our knee, it'll bleed for a little bit, but then eventually the blood coagulates and you have a scab forming. With the anticoagulant, what essentially that does is ensures that that blood never clots and ensures that that blood, you get a free flow of blood for the lamprey as long as it wants to be on that fish. So jumping back to the sea lamprey invasion, when sea lampreys initially invaded, there are many jurisdictions on the Great Lakes. So you have two nations in the U.S. and Canada. You have 8 Great Lakes states. You have tribal entities on the United States as well as Canada, and 2 provinces on the Canadian side. And so seeing the devastation that sea lampreys caused when they initially invaded, and hearing the outcry from both Canadian and U.S. citizens, the governments of the US and Canada came together and they signed a treaty to form our organization, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, in 1954. And they did this because they realized that there was going to be no one entity that was going to be able to, or there wasn't going to be, they weren't going to be able to rather piecemeal figure this out. They, up until this point, they had tried and failed to sign, I think it's something like 80 treaties to uh, break up management and delegate management of the Great Lakes among all these different jurisdictions. And with the sea lamprey invasion, it really made them realize that they weren't going to be able to do this by giving each jurisdiction a little piece of the pie. It was going to need to be one organization that stretches across all these jurisdictions. And so that's what inspired the convention in 1954, which created the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. And in that convention, the GLFC was assigned 3 primary duties. So conduct science, control sea lamprey, and coordinate fishery management. And so here is a little graphic that talks a little bit about our organization. So we have, I am a part of the Secretariat. So we have both Canadian and US section of the commission. So we have commissioners that we report to from Canada and the US. We also have Canadian and US advisors, as well as commission appointed boards that help us advise us on emerging issues, as well as directions of things like our research programs. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, we have our duties of the commission. So we have sea lamprey control, science, and coordinating fishery management. And getting in a little bit into some of those duties, so coordinating fishery management or maintaining working arrangements, as the convention says. As I talked about, there are many jurisdictions on the links. There are many complex issues, including ecosystem or science matters, translating science into management, and all these have to balance competing interests. And all this to say is, over the years, we've learned that agencies need to work together. Cooperation is the name of the game. And that cooperation namely comes through the form of what's called the Joint Strategic Plan for the Management of Great Lakes Fisheries, which was signed in 1981 and is facilitated by the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. And what this did is it created what we call the Council of Lake Committees. So this is where, or rather Council of Lake Committees and Lake Committee system. Where each different lake has a council of representatives from everyone that has jurisdiction on the lake. So for example, Lake Superior, we have folks from the 1854 Treaty Authority, Chippewa Ottawa Resource Authority, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, DNRs from the states bordering that. So you have Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, as well as Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewas. So this lake committee system, what's remarkable about it is this is all voluntary. So all of these organizations are sitting on these lake committees and not only working within their committees, but working across the different committees to do things like share information in science, determine shared priorities, and talk about emerging issues. And the remarkable thing is these are all this is a non-binding agreement. There is nothing like a treaty, like for example, that established the GLFC. There isn't a treaty that's ensuring that the lake committee members actually show up to this metaphorical table and talk with each other and share these resources and decide on priorities. It is just for the mutual understanding that the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, or the Great Lakes Fishery rather, needs cooperation to succeed, and this non-binding cooperation is necessary for the success of the fishery. So pretty cool system. Another aspect of the Commission's program, coordinating fishery research. Of course, science is the basis for successful management. And so with that, the Commission funds three primary suites of research. So we fund research on the fishery, we fund research on sea lampreys, and that sea lamprey research is a partnership with some folks like the University of Guelph, the U.S. Geological Survey, and Michigan State University. And then perhaps the science research that we fund that I find is the most fascinating is what's called our science transfer program. So in that science transfer program, we're getting the science to those who will put it to use, the managers. And in that science transfer program, we flip the traditional science and science funding mechanism on its head. We kind of shift the paradigm. So traditionally, when research is put out, oftentimes these researchers put out these great papers, these great new studies, a lot of great information, but because it's a scientific paper, a person who is a manager, for example, might not have the expertise to read through that high-level paper and really pick out, here are the applicable parts to me as a manager that's making, say, stocking decisions, and here is what can help inform my day-to-day decisions. And so with the science transfer program, what happens is we actually go to the managers first, and we say what do you need? What kind of information do you need? And how can we fund science, and how can we create products that can help meet those needs? And so with that, we identify projects that managers are in need of more information about, and often create really cool products and very informational and useful products like graphics slides, for example. So here, for example, is some products from a recent project on the use of environmental DNA, or eDNA, as a monitoring technique. And so this is just a cool little graphic that talks about all the different ways that a eDNA can be affected. And then we also have, as part of that product packet, we have a nice graphic showcasing how eDNA actually works. And this is just a subset of the products that was created. I believe what was also produced was a very informative slide deck for managers, talking about what the uses of eDNA, how to implement it on a cost-effective basis, as well as other products for the public as well. So just wanted to highlight that as a means of showing that the GLC funds some pretty cool science. And perhaps getting into the rest of the presentation here, perhaps the most well-known aspect of the GLC's work is our sea lamprey control program. And before we understand sea lamprey control, we need to talk a little bit about the sea lamprey's life cycle. So when sea lampreys are ready to reproduce, they are going to swim from the lakes up into rivers and streams to spawn. But they can't spawn necessarily everywhere in the Great Lakes. What they're going to do is they are swimming upstream, and they're looking for rocky, what we call substrate, or what's on the stream bottom. So you notice in this graphic here, you have a little bit of some rocks on the bottom, and the reason they're looking for those that rocky substrate is that they're going to use their sucker mouths to make this horseshoe-shaped nest. So once the males have made that nest, they will actually excrete a pheromone that lets the females know that they are ready to reproduce. And then the two will intertwine, and they will actually lay the fertilized eggs in that rocky horseshoe-shaped nest. What's pretty remarkable is that the females are going to lay up to 100,000 eggs. And to kind of visualize that, take a look at this photo right here, where you can see a dissected sea lamprey, and you can see that that female's body is pretty well chock full of all those eggs. And we aren't kidding when we say they lay a ton of eggs. about 10% of those are actually going to be viable. So the sea lampreys implement a evolutionary strategy in reproducing wherein they produce as many offspring as possible, and they are going to invest very little time and effort in making sure that sorry about that. They're going to invest very little time and effort in making sure that their offspring survive. So that's kind of on the opposite end compared to like humans, for example, where we produce very few offspring, and then we invest a lot of time and energy into making sure that the sea lampreys are, or rather, we invest a lot of time and energy in making sure that our offspring actually survive and make it to the age to eventually reproduce. Because from an evolutionary perspective, what is the point of an organism's existence except to reproduce and make more organisms, right? So yeah, so sea lampreys, like I said, kind of have on one end of that spectrum where because they're going to die after they spawn, they are going to lay all those eggs and then not really put any effort into ensuring those survive, and whatever survives, survives. And even though 10% traditionally would be, if you're looking at, like a human or other animal that doesn't produce a lot of offspring, 10% might not seem like a very good strategy, but when you're producing up to 100,000 eggs, it certainly works out for them. And it is certainly part of the reason that sea lampreys are one of the most prolific species here in the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, they're very widespread. So yeah, so after the sea lampreys go upstream to spawn and die, from the eggs will hatch sea lamprey larvae. And the sea lamprey larvae, what they're going to do is they're going to swim downstream, hatch out of the eggs, swim downstream where they're going to filter feed. And in the larval stage, this is actually the longest stage of the sea lamprey's life cycle. So in their larval stage, sea lampreys will spend anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes as many as 10 years filter feeding. And you'll notice in this little graphic here that sea lampreys, they don't, in their larval stage, they don't have any eyes. And so all they're doing is kind of poking their little head out of the stream and using that mouth to filter feed things like phytoplankton, zooplankton, and other nutrients and detritus. So they'll hang out in this stage for quite a while, and then at some point they are going to actually metamorphose, similar to how a butterfly or caterpillar rather transforms into a butterfly. And what's really interesting is that we're still trying to pinpoint exactly that mechanism of transformation, that mechanism of metamorphosis. We're not entirely sure whether it's the accumulation of resources and nutrients within that larval sea lamprey, whether it's biotic or abiotic factors that really causes it, but at some point the sea lamprey is going to metamorphose. So that is when they are going to start having the developing this sucker mouth that sea lampreys are so well known for, and they're also going to develop eyes. And at that point, that's when they're actually going to go out into the lakes to start feeding on fish. And you can see some of the recently transformed sea lampreys here. So even though they are small, they will grow up to be quite large and quite destructive fish killers. So the sea lampreys will then migrate from the streams out into the lakes to feed on fish. So sea lampreys will feed on the fish for about 12 to 18 months. And each sea lamprey is going to kill about 40 pounds of fish. So they're very, very destructive. The sea lampreys will actually kill, we estimate, about 6 out of every 7 fish that they attach to, because they leave a pretty nasty wound that even if that fish did survive, by simply having that wound, that fish is going to be more susceptible to predation, or that wound will become infected and cause the fish to die. And then sea lampreys, they do prefer large-bodied fish like lake trout and whitefish, but in the absence of that, they will feed on just about anything they can get their mouths on. We've seen them on fish like salmon, really large fish like sturgeon, to small fish like bass, perch, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, sea lampreys are not that picky when it comes to the fish they feed upon. And yeah, again, very destructive, killing about 40 pounds of fish. So now that we know about the sea lamprey's life cycle, let's go ahead and get into major sea lamprey control programs, or major sea lamprey control methods, rather. And so The Christian Sea Lamprey Control Program is a binational control program reflecting the binational nature of the GLFC itself, being a Canadian and US organization. And through our control program, we have two primary methods, and then I included traps in here. That's kind of in development. But this program is facilitated with the help of our sea lamprey control agents at Fisheries and Oceans in Canada and the US Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as our partners at the US Geological Survey and the Army Corps of Engineers. So our primary and most maybe well-known control method is going to be lampricides. So these are a pesticide that we apply in rivers and streams where we know there are large concentrations of the sea lamprey larvae. As I mentioned earlier, talking about the sea lamprey's life cycle, that larval stage is going to be one of the longest stages of the sea lamprey's life cycle. And so oftentimes using these pesticides, we're actually able to kill multiple year classes of sea lamprey larvae. However, we have to be very strategic in where we apply these pesticides. So this map shows the I believe it's 400 streams where we have found larval sea lampreys in the Great Lakes. And as you might imagine, it's not feasible to attack every one of these streams and treat every one of these streams with the pesticide, mostly because we don't have the staff time to do that. And we are battling weather, of course, that we need to be able to be going out when the weather is warm, when we're able to access the river. And then finally, that pesticide, even though it's really effective, it is also very expensive. So we need to be very strategic about where we're applying the pesticide at. And we do that by what you see in this photo here called assessment. So this is a backpack electrofisher. And so in this backpack, what's this doing? It's sending out a small electrical current through these two little paddles. And what that's doing is that's tickling the larval sea lampreys out of the stream so that the control agent can capture those. And so when in this process is called assessment. And so in assessment, what the control agents will do is actually go out into a potential river and stream, and they'll walk all up and down the stream, and they'll do this backpack electrofishing to determine the presence and the distribution of sea lamprey larvae to see how far upstream and how far downstream the sea lampreys are, but then B, also seeing the concentration, the density of them. And so those assessment surveys are what inform our decision to treat a stream. And so we will develop a plan for treating streams every single year. So usually the field season lasts about mid-April to late fall, late September, October. And so we use that assessment information to develop our treatment schedule and determine which streams need to be treated. And so once we have determined a stream needs to be treated, there actually needs to be, there's quite a bit of work that goes into collecting data and ensuring that that treatment is going to be successful. So we have to do a lot of pre-treatment data collection before we actually are applying the pesticide in the stream. So a treatment will last over the course of the whole thing will last maybe 10 days, sometimes up to 2 weeks. But we're not actually applying the pesticide for that full time. A lot of that time is doing this pre-treatment and the post-treatment data collection. And so the pre-treatment data collection looks at things like pH, alkalinity, temperature, and dissolved oxygen of the river. You're also looking at things like the flow of the water. So sometimes there are dye studies conducted to see how long does it take water to flow from one stretch of the river down to another stretch of the river. So a lot of this data is really critical to ensuring that we are maintaining our effectiveness of the lampricides, but then also ensuring that we are minimizing or entirely eliminating any non-target mortality, any effects to any of the native species in the ecosystem. And so when it actually comes time to treat a stream, what we're applying is what's going to be called TFM, or 3-trifluoromethyl 4-nitrophenol. And this often is applied in a liquid form, as you can kind of see from here and here. But it also can be applied in other formats as well, like these bars of lampricide as well. And so what we're going to be doing is we're applying the TFM over the course of oftentimes 24, sometimes 48 hours will be the treatment. And then what's pretty remarkable is that the pesticide actually will naturally break down, so it photodegrades, breaks down by the sun, and that the pesticide is actually going to specifically target the larval sea lampreys in the ecosystem and largely leave most of those native species unharmed. So sea lampreys are almost like living dinosaurs. So even though they are fish, they are one of the most early and less evolved species of fish. And because of that, they're unable to process this TFM, the pesticide, at the concentration that we're applying it at. Most of the other fish in an ecosystem are going to be more evolved than sea lampreys, and thus are able to process the lampricides without any problem. And so, as far as the treatment of an ecosystem, when we're applying that pesticide, what we want to do is we want to create what we call the wave. So what we want to do is create essentially a giant block of pesticide and ensure that we're putting that pesticide in all the nooks and crannies of a stream. And so you can kind of see from this graphic here, what we want to do is apply the pesticide in all the different small tributaries to a river and ensure that we can apply that in a time-effective manner such that when the pesticide is reaching the mouth of a tributary, that the pesticide that we apply in that tributary meets that larger block of TFM at that same time. And all this is doing is ensuring that the sea lampreys don't have any refuge, anywhere to hide, so that all the nooks and crannies in that river where the sea lamprey larvae might try to escape the pesticide are then filled with that pesticide, so that we are able to maintain that effectiveness and kill those sea lamprey larvae. So we primarily use TFM in fast-moving, shallow rivers and streams, but there are also streams and rivers that have larval sea lampreys that are much larger and much more slow-moving. So places like the St. Mary's River, the Detroit River, for example, these systems are, if we were to apply the TFM at the concentration that we are applying it in the rivers and streams, we would need a ton of pesticide. And as I mentioned before, the pesticide is really expensive. So we actually had to formulate a different application of the pesticide. And so this for these particular systems that are larger, slower moving, we use what's called granular balicide. And so this is a granular form of the lampricide, and it's attached to a sand granule, and it's applied via the spray boat. And so the granules are applied via the spray boat. The granules sink to the stream bed where the larval sea lampreys are burrowed, and then it kills them there. And as I mentioned, of course, the one of the largest parts of these sea lamprey control treatments are minimizing or entirely eliminating any effects to the native species in an ecosystem. So as I mentioned, the lampricide is most effective or selective for the sea lampreys because sea lampreys are very ancient organisms. We do know that there are other ancient fish species in some tributaries, streams and rivers that can be affected by the pesticides. So things like mud puppies, things like lake sturgeon, for example. But we've been doing this process for the lampricide treatments for more than 70 years. So we have a pretty extensive data set of where the opportunities for non-target mortality may arise. And then we also do surveys before and after a lampricide treatment to target those species that can be affected. And in the case of lake sturgeon, for example, what we'll actually do is we'll actually do what we call the sturgeon roundup. And so we can work with partners and we'll actually go capture those sturgeon in a stream that's to be treated. And we'll actually hold those sturgeon in a streamside rearing facility and hold them in fresh water for the duration of the treatment and return them back once that treatment is finished. And of course, while we do like to eliminate or minimize the best we can non-target mortality, it does happen. I'm not going to sit here and act like we are perfect and there's never been a native species that has ever been harmed. But it's important to keep that non-target mortality in context, right? So we are both on the same team, right? We are all working together for the health of the Great Lakes ecosystem, for the health of the Great Lakes fishery. Oftentimes, when non-target mortality does occur, it's small numbers of native species, so it's not going to actually have population level effects. And again, back to if you're putting in the cost benefit, right? So while it is unfortunate that we may kill a handful of native species, for example, if you contrast that with the thousands, the tens of thousands, sometimes even millions of sea lamprey larvae that we are killing with these treatments, the cost just it makes sense, right? So if you extrapolate out the 10,000 sea lamprey larvae we're killing, each capable of killing 40 pounds of fish, and then even further extrapolate that to half of those being females, and each of those capable of laying 100,000 eggs and producing 10,000 sea lamprey, viable sea lamprey larvae. It really just makes sense. And again, we're all on the same team. We're all pushing towards the health of the Great Lakes fishery and working to make the ecosystem and the fishery the shared world-class resource that we all know and enjoy. So in addition to lampricides, our other primary control method is barriers. So barriers prevent the upstream migration of sea lampreys, of adult sea lampreys, to their spawning grounds. So as I mentioned earlier, sea lampreys are very voracious reproducers. So they're going to produce a lot of offspring. So the barriers really help us ensure that we're minimizing the amount of reproduction that happens, and then also minimizes the amount of stream miles that we have to treat with that costly pesticide. So barriers can either be purposely built to block sea lampreys, or they can be other structures like dams that happen to exist but do function as sea lamprey control measures. And so to be an effective sea lamprey barrier, a barrier only needs to be about 18 inches or 1.5 feet tall. And that will allow some jumping fish to bypass the barrier, but then still block the sea lampreys. However, barriers are present a or are part of rather a larger conversation happening in conservation and what we call the connectivity conundrum, where barriers in general are good because they can block invasive species from reaching new habitat, but they're also detrimental to native species that are historically might have enjoyed using the full range of a system, and you know need the access to the full range of that system for historic spawning grounds, for the health of their population. So there really is a catch-22 in terms of barriers. They are really effective at blocking invasive species, but they can also block native species. And we are trying to solve that. We at the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, along with other partners, are trying to solve that with a new project up in Traverse City, Michigan, called Fish Pass. So Fish Pass is the capstone of a 20-year restoration project on a major river there called the Boardman-Ottaway River. And so upstream of this dam here in downtown Traverse City, the Union Street Dam, there have already been, I believe it's 3 dams removed, and so they're working to restore the connectivity of this system. And so with this 4th dam that historically was failing, what the commission decided to do along with our partners is actually we're going to replace this dam, but then not only that, but then we're going to have a experimental fish sorting channel downstream of the dam. And so in that channel, we're going to investigate ways to passively sort native from invasive species. So currently the most effective way one of the most effective ways to sort native from invasive species is by trapping, right? So we can put a trap at these barriers and then that will allow us to hand move upstream near native species, but then throw back downstream invasive species. And while that is really effective, it is also very costly in terms of time and staff time. And so with this experimental fish sorting channel, the idea is maybe we can find ways to passively sort native from invasive species, looking at things like bubble curtains, sound, lights, and that sort of thing, where we are able to kind of bypass that connectivity conundrum and allow native species to continue upstream, block invasive species, and do that in a cost-effective manner. And as I mentioned, we are doing this project with a number of different partners, both in Traverse City and throughout the state of Michigan and across North America. And if you want to learn more, you can check out our website at glc.org/FISPass or scan this QR code. And then, as I mentioned, our final control method, though it's, as I say here, a little bit in development, is traps. I say it's in development because traps, we don't consider a bona fide control method. So the proportion of the sea lamprey population that we are removing with traps does not actually make a substantial dent in the sea lamprey populations. However, traps are still a very important part of the sea lamprey control program. So they're used for assessment purposes. So based on year-to-year changes in the sea lamprey trap catches, we can see, or at least get a better idea of how the sea lamprey population is fluctuating and how our sea lamprey control efforts are doing. The traps also provide us with live animals to do education and outreach like this, as well as for research purposes at our research station up in northern Michigan. To kind of wrap up sea lamprey control, so sea lampreys are extremely resilient. As I mentioned, they're very voracious reproducers, and so because of that, control must be ongoing or sea lampreys will bounce back. And we definitely have seen that in the recent years post-COVID. So during 2020 and 2021, thanks to government-related travel restrictions, we weren't able to go out and treat a lot of the traditional streams with our pesticides. And because of that, in almost the immediate years following 2020 and 2021, we saw jumps in sea lamprey populations. So you can kind of see in Lake Superior this big jump here. You can kind of see a big jump here in Erie, a pretty significant jump in Lake Ontario. And again, that goes back to the fact that sea lampreys are very resilient. Control needs to be ongoing. If we take our foot off the metaphorical gas pedal, sea lampreys will bounce back. We have sea lamprey populations reduced by more than 90% compared to the historic highs of the 1950s and 1960s. So they're very much currently under control, but that is only because of ongoing control. And of course, that ongoing control supports a thriving $7 billion Great Lakes fishery, which supports over 75,000 jobs, is the backbone of local communities, and is a shared resource between the US and Canada. And so with the last, I got about 4 minutes left here. I'm going to dive a little bit more into the future of our sea lamprey control program and what's called supplemental controls. So while I mentioned that both the lampricides and the barriers are really effective, we do want to diversify our metaphorical toolbox to come up with other methods to control sea lampreys to reduce our reliance upon lampricides and barriers, but then also enhance control where those lampricides and barriers can tend to be less effective. One of those avenues we're exploring is the release of sterilized males. In that method, what we'll do is we'll actually capture spawning males when they're running upstream to spawn. We will sterilize them and then re-release them into the stream where they will spawn with a female, produce no viable offspring, and then both the female and male will die. We also have pheromones, looking into the future of our control methods. So pheromones are a large component of the sea lamprey's life cycle. They use these natural odors to communicate with one another. There are two kind of flavors of pheromones that we have identified. So there are attractants. Larval sea lampreys can actually excrete pheromones to help adult sea lampreys that are ready to spawn identify that there is a viable spawning habitat in that stream. So by excreting a pheromone from the sea lamprey larvae, the adult sea lampreys that are at the mouth of this river know that an adult has successfully spawned and reproduced in that stream, and so that there must be a viable spawning habitat. And then, as I mentioned earlier, talking about the sea lamprey's life cycle, there is also sex pheromones given off by male sea lampreys when they build a nest and are ready to reproduce to tell female sea lampreys they are ready to reproduce. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have repellent pheromones. So these are what we've primarily identified as the alarm cue or a fight or flight response. So when a sea lamprey smells this alarm cue, the message is that there is a predator nearby and there's a chance there is a sea lamprey dying. Well, the message says that there's a sea lamprey dying and that there is a chance that they may die themselves, that there is a predator nearby. And the hope with these attractants and repellents is that we might be able to improve trapping. So like I mentioned earlier, trapping currently isn't a bona fide control method. And so the hope is that with these pheromones, we might be able to improve the catches of those traps. And then another avenue that, along with these pheromones, is pheromone antagonists. So this is actually what we refer to as like a chemical nose plug. And so when we've applied pheromone antagonists, what we've seen is that female sea lampreys aren't able to actually smell the pheromone given off by male lampreys. So even though a nest may be built in that stream, with the pheromone antagonist, it kind of blocks their ability to smell pheromones, and they aren't able to find that rivers or stream. And so this is what I was talking about in terms of improving our trapping, what we call push-pull. And so the idea is that, so if there is a sea lamprey coming upstream to spawn, we might push it away from good spawning habitat by applying our alarm cue or repellent pheromone, and then using the attractant pheromone to pull them towards a place we want them to go, say a trap. And then as far as the pheromone antagonist, like I mentioned, there's chemical nose plugs. So even though you have male sea lampreys that are very viable suitors ready to reproduce, the females aren't able to identify that and smell them. And then finally, to end the presentation here, I'll show you a little bit about our alarm cues. So this is just a video of sea lampreys in a tank, and you'll see a researcher pours in some of this alarm cue, so you can kind of get an idea of just how visceral of a reaction these sea lampreys have to this alarm cue. And so with that, you kind of see just how dramatic of a reaction they have. Like I mentioned, this alarm cue, the message it's sending is that there's a predator nearby. This is a fight or flight response, and so you can see they're trying to get out of there. They're trying to escape that situation as much as they can. So while the pheromones have shown promise within research, it will be a little while before we're actually able to successfully implement them in the field. Promising, while it has been promising in the lab, a couple of things I've need to be sorted out before we're actually to widely apply it in our control program. The first being the cost. So we have to be able to produce these pheromones on a cost-effective measure, and then also determining how effective these pheromones are over a longer period of time. So similar to how you might light a candle in your house and it smells really good for the first hour, but then after 3 hours, you kind of get used to the smell. You can't, we found that you can't pump an alarm cue or say an attractant pheromone into a stream and have the sea lampreys respond to it that entire time. So after a certain amount of time, there is kind of a reset period that they are no longer responding to this pheromone. And so there needs to be some more research in terms of making sure that if we're able to use it and able to produce it in a cost-effective manner, but then also determining the effects of that on the sea lampreys and the timing wise of when they do and don't become too adjusted and sensitized to that. So I did have a few more slides on history, but it looks like I went a little long, so I'm going to do a quick plug, skip most of those slides, but do a quick plug for a couple of really cool projects about sea lamprey history that have come out in the last couple of years. So the first is Great Lakes Sea Lamprey by my colleague, Dr. Corey Brandt. So Corey went and did over 100 interviews as part of a oral history project documenting the sea lamprey's invasion into the Great Lakes. He took a lot of these interviews, and that informed this really well-written, really fun read that he produced. He published, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago. And then also more recently, there's been, we've published a documentary film that kind of utilized some of the interviews that Corey did and builds on a lot of the work that he did to create this documentary film called The Fish Thief, A Great Lakes Mystery, which is available for streaming on Amazon Prime. You can learn more at thefishthief.com, but narrated by J.K. Simmons, it provides a really fascinating look at the what life was like when sea lampreys first invaded, and the firsthand devastation that many of the folks in the Great Lakes experienced when sea lampreys invaded. So with that, I can take folks' questions, and thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thanks so much, Ross, for that. I will echo your plug for Fish Thief. I think I've watched it twice now. It does a really great job of just showcasing all of the work that went into lots of the things you mentioned throughout your presentation. But I won't talk too much because we have questions and a little bit of time. Ron asks, what are the predators of the lamprey? Are there any in the Great Lakes? Is there ways to increase that predator population as maybe a means of biocontrol?
Yeah, great question. So unfortunately, no. The ecosystems are this very delicate balance of just enough predators for just enough prey. And if there is more predators or more prey, the ecosystem is thrown off balance. This ecosystem evolves over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. And so when an invasive species comes in here in a relatively short amount of time, ecologically speaking, thousands of years, it takes a really long time for the ecosystem to adapt, even if it does even adapt. Right. And so we've unfortunately have not seen that with the Great Lakes. We know that when we apply the lampricide, for example, and you have dead sea lamprey larvae, fish, muskrats, birds might come eat them, but we don't. If, as far as I'm aware, we don't have an understanding that there is a specific predator-prey relationship between one specific species and sea lampreys. With regards to biocontrol, it's obviously a very slippery slope in terms of we don't want to introduce something new into the ecosystem and have that then become the problem, which has happened quite a few times in the past.
Awesome, thank you. Just some questions in terms of the pesticide use.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it boils down to like maybe reiterating all of the scientific rigor that went into creating that. And I will say to folks, if you watch Fish Thief, it's a huge part of that and how it really ensured that sea lamprey was the target of it. And there was, as you mentioned, limited to no, kind of runoff effects to that
Yeah.
lampricide use.
Yeah. And I'm kind of kicking myself for taking a little bit longer and not keeping as close an eye on the time because it is a really fascinating part of the development of lampricide. So what they did was they put out calls to these chemical companies, and essentially they did what are called bioassays, where they took a jar of fish or took a jar of water, put in a bluegill, a trout, and a sea lamprey larvae, and then took the chemical and put it in there and see what would kill the sea lamprey and not harm any of the other fish species. They did this over the course of, I believe, 3 or 4 years. It wasn't until chemical 5209 that they found TFM, the same chemical we use today, and this was more than 60 years ago, that killed sea lamprey larvae and didn't kill any of the other native fish species. So in addition to that scientific lift, we are registered through the EPA and Environment Canada. So there's a lot of work and science, ongoing science that needs to happen with that, and a significant amount of training for a biologist to effectively apply that pesticide. So like I mentioned, we're applying this pesticide in a very precise way. We're not just going out there and dumping the pesticide into the streams and rivers. It's a very rigorous process and something we obviously take very seriously.
Awesome, thank you. I couldn't remember the huge number that it was,
Yeah.
like chemical number that they tried. I just remembered it was in the thousands. So, yes, lots of work has been done. Um, I think maybe our last or second last question, why is harvesting lampreys not a way to control their numbers?
Yeah, so as far as harvesting lampreys for like other uses, for example, sea lampreys are unfortunately going to have high concentrations of heavy metals and pollutants. So, for example, people always ask, well, why can't you use them as like a feed fish, right? For example, and that's because they have these heavy metals and pollutants. They're feeding on oftentimes the apex predators, the largest fish in an ecosystem, and through a process of bioaccumulation, these fish already have higher than normal concentrations of heavy metals and pollutants. And unfortunately, just in their blood. And because the sea lampreys are feeding on the blood specifically, they're going to have extraordinarily higher concentrations of those heavy metals and pollutants.
So, okay, I put your email in the chat. I hope that's okay for any
Yes,
follow-up
absolutely.
questions that
Please
folks
send me questions.
may not.
I'd be happy to talk
Yeah,
things over with folks.
yeah. So I'll have one last question here, and then we'll wrap it up. So does sea lamprey have an impact or any connectivity to other invasive species, possibly Phragmites? Have you seen any of those kind of invasive to invasive interactions with sea lamprey?
Yeah, honestly, not that I'm aware of, but I have to be quite honest here and say I'm not as involved on the cutting edge of research, and specifically with sea lamprey impacts to other not native species. So unfortunately, I don't have a precise answer there, and it's nothing. I haven't heard of anything, but of course that doesn't mean that there isn't something that's happening that may be early on in terms of the research process. But yeah, nothing that I'm currently aware of.
Thank you. I think the person who asked that question, maybe you do a bit of research and follow up with us, and then we'll learn things from you.
Right? Yeah, there you
That's
go.
always great. Okay, so I'm not going to bother taking the time to share my screen to wrap it up. All the screen said was thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Ross, for participating in this. You can always go to our website, invasivespeciescenter.ca, to learn about upcoming initiatives, to learn more about invasive species, risk assessments, all the fun things. And then you can go to invasivespeciescenter.ca/webinar, and you will see all of our upcoming webinars. So yeah, that is my small closing, but thank you so much, Ross, and thank you for everyone joining us. We'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks so much, everyone. It was great speaking with you all.